What is it that actually makes someone's life valuable? Any measure you might think up can, by and large, be argued against from a different perspective or definition. Distilling such a provocative question down to one word is tricky enough, and somehow gets even more complicated when stretching it out into a comprehensive idea. Jujutsu Kaisen is a story that takes that original question and forms an entire narrative around it. But what is it that the story is trying to say about self-worth, the value of a human life, and what it means for us? My name is Josh, I'm the host of Beyond Media, and in this video we'll be diving into Jujutsu Kaisen's sacred virtue. Jujutsu as a power system and storytelling device is incredibly interesting because by nature it somewhat breaks a lot of what you might see in other traditional shonen. Themes and ideas like hard work or unity are either relegated as inconsequential or ultimately unimpactful towards a sorcerer's upward potential. About 90% of a sorcerer's potential is dictated exclusively by talent, meaning the margin by which any individual can actually raise their individual ceiling is incredibly thin, if they can even access an aspect of the power system at all at a rudimentary level. Even characters online that you see grouped into that weird category of characters that ignore the power system, namely Toji and Maki, excel only due to their participation within the system in the first place. Heavenly restrictions do not exist outside the realm of Jujutsu, but as an active functioning part within it. Their talents, latent or otherwise, likewise mirror the potentials of characters who do have cursed techniques and are therefore subject to the same narrative infrastructure. However, before we go further into tying the power system into this topic, let's step back and look at one of the thesis statements of the series. In the very first chapter, a question is posed to the reader inquiring what it means to die a good death, and that idea is redefined and represented over the course of several different points in the story. While it may at first seem to have no connection to value, the existence of a good death naturally implies the existence of a good life before it. To die a good death surrounded by others, one must live a good life full of love. The question that then provides is what exactly does it mean to live a good life? Over and over, that idea is tested through the lens of Yuji Itadori, a young sorcerer who, though initially is strongly against the need to kill, slowly becomes someone who is actively taking other lives in pursuit of maintaining his life and the lives of others. The medium at which he does this is through Jujutsu, and the way that sorcerers are valued is through power. Whether it be through combat power or support utility, access to it grants someone high esteem within the world of Jujutsu. When you take a look at the two strongest characters in the series, Gojo Satoru and Gojo and Sukuna, their natures as the strongest bring boundless amounts of both ambition and isolation. Both of them are allowed to give their personal anecdotes on what elevates someone to their level in chapters 58 and 116 respectively. Gojo says to Megumi, quote, "Megumi, you don't know how to bring out your best, do you? Jujutsu is an individual sport. No matter how many allies you have around you, you die alone. Give it your all, it's okay to be selfish." And Sukuna says to Jogo, quote, "Humans flocking together, curses flocking together. Comparing themselves to those around them leads to weakness and stunts their growth. You should have burned everything you desired to a cinder without thinking, to reach the heights of Gojo Satoru and not worry about future or identity. But you lacked the hunger to take hold of your desires." There are three things that really stand out across both their anecdotes, and they all relate to how one achieves true power. The first is found in the ambition indicative of the strongest. Gojo says to be selfish, and Sukuna says to be hungry, and make the necessary sacrifices to achieve greater heights. Hunger or greed for power is often tied to either rapid progression or growth, exhibited through characters like Mahito, who cares not for anything except his own desires or hunger. The second commonality between them is the nature of isolation in relation to that hunger. Sukuna states that togetherness actively stunts growth, and Gojo says that Jujutsu is an individual sport. Power in the world of Jujutsu Kaisen is inherently isolating, which is something not only seen through Gojo and Sukuna, but also characters like Geto and Toji. And the third thing that unites their philosophies is the fact that both agree that those two traits in that specific relation to each other is what allows someone to reach not only the heights of the strongest, but also each individual's highest potential. Even if one does not intend on becoming the strongest in the overall sense, in order for oneself to achieve their own very best, they must be willing to give up identity, connection, and their own future beyond their victory. You see this being accomplished either through literal advancement like Mahito's true form, mentally through Hanami's enjoyment of combat, or symbolically through Maki's arc with the Zenin clan. No matter how you slice it, within this world, isolation, greed for power, and individuality are all some of the highest possible virtues that one is able to exhibit. The inability to do so results in inaction, lost, or in absolutely worst instances, death. Whether or not this mindset is fundamentally negative is almost never explicitly questioned or challenged, in large part due to the overwhelmingly supported feedback loop that fuels this mentality. The strong and selfish and talented keep winning while the unconvicted, the sacrificial, and the weak continue to be destroyed. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, this dynamic will and has bastardized connection within this world, which leads to JJK being somewhat countercultural when it comes to what it seems to preach. While having friends and working with others is nice enough and all well and good, Ultimately, the real monsters of the world know that that's all fluff for those who don't have the ability to reach the top. Conversely, in other anime, it's often the idea of unity, need for others, friendships, and connections as a prerequisite to achieving their goals in the first place. But JJK doesn't only take the opposite route in terms of what you might normally see. While relationships with others and the value of those relationships themselves may be flipped, another massive aspect of JJK's discussion of power is individuality, which is commonly seen across a lot of different series. Sticking out, either by being true to who you are or working hard to become who you want to be, are high-value traits that are common among lots of shonen heroes. Even extending beyond genres into things like sports or romance anime, individuality, especially in shonen, is a high-value personality trait, and even more so in JJK when individuality and independence are directly tied to the success and value of a sorcerer. When Todo tells Yuji that they are exceptions, it's not only that they're abnormal within the context of the normal existence, but also within the world of Jujutsu. They are exceptions among exceptions. While these ideas may come off as standard or virtuous in the West, where self-expression and individualism is more or less standardized, things are starkly different in the Japanese homeland of a lot of these series. In a country like America, self-realization, self-reliance, and self-expression are all high and leads to it being widely considered to be an individualistic society. But in Japan, individualism is filtered through a collectivist worldview where the needs of the many are uniform with a focus on group growth and harmony. In my opinion, this is a great deal in further contextualizing the extreme value that JJK puts on individuality and its relationship with power and self-worth. Considering the culture of origin for not just JJK but all anime and manga, it frames JJK's depiction in a far more extreme light. It stands to reason then that the extremity of this kind of perspective on mindset power is not as quickly perceived by the Western mind that tends to focus on and even encourage individualism. A series and commentary more direct but similar to this is found in Chapter 8 of Blue Lock. Here, Eigo Jinpachi speaks explicitly on this collectivist nature while also pushing forward individuality among the players of Team Z. Quote, "Let's talk about Japan as an example. Japanese people like to be given roles to fulfill for other people and for the good of the world. There are people skilled at devoting themselves to their roles and they see it as a virtue. Putting this into the world of sports is easy to understand which major sport Japan can compete in. That's baseball. Pitcher, catcher, infielder, outfielder, first batter, fourth batter, and all of the above, innings are divided into offensive and defensive turns, all on a large field where no one collides with each other. This sport, in which players have clearly defined roles that they can totally pour themselves into, is extraordinarily suited for the Japanese people idiosyncrasy, and that's why they're so strong. But soccer is different. That's why what's needed is individual effort, your own personal power." This framework of ego, self, and the individual over everything that is repeatedly worshipped and drilled as the mantra of Blue Lock is very much cultural commentary as well as narrative ideals, similar to how the philosophy of individuality is woven through Jujutsu Kaisen. And this individualism is that sacred virtue. The idea that, at the very core, when the dust settles, the strongest are the ones who are still standing. And those people are the ones who are able to play greedy for power and value themselves as the absolute greatest they possibly can. At the end of the day, Jujutsu is an individual sport, and when you die alone. However, the rest of this video will openly and freely talk about manga spoilers through the end of the series. If you are trying to stay clean, this is your chance to escape. This virtue is a major part of what makes the Gojo vs Sukuna fight a philosophical dilemma on top of it being a spectacle. Gojo is the one here that is fighting alone, whereas Sukuna has access to Megami's body and the 10 shadows. Strictly speaking, when observing the praised virtues that have been chanted to us through everything prior to this event, Gojo should win and maintain the spiritual identity of the strongest, along with upholding all of the stipulations that come with that title. However, Gojo's goals do not line up with this idea. He wants a world where a collective is able to stand shoulder to shoulder with each other, a world where a strict strongest exists more as an idea rather than as a godlike being. In order for that world to come about, Gojo is either not allowed to exist within it, or the rest of the cast must reasonably elevate to his level. The duel between Gojo and Sukuna is cleverly meant to both balance and explore this idea, while also allowing the narrative to continue. On a purely technical level, Gojo's losing is an outcome that allows the maintenance of each individual moniker of the strongest. Sukuna having access to the 10 shadows in Megami's body means that there will always be a reasonable asterisk on his victory. Meanwhile, Gojo purely fighting alone will likewise provide an asterisk on his death. However, what this outcome means for everything we've talked about so far is what actually seems to move the needle ever so slightly. In the duel, the one who is embodying the pre-existing philosophy on strength at a more fundamental level is Gojo, and his loss is the first metaphorical crack on the mindset that we've been provided this far. While the fight doesn't question the idea of the strongest, it does start to question what exactly that idea means. Now, there is another character who has prodded at this idea in the world of Jujutsu before. Yuta Okotsu is not only symbolically defined by other people being able to access their cursed techniques, tainting his personal version of individuality with a necessity for others, but also in the literal sense as well. In JJK 0, we can find him saying, quote, "I tried to run away and disappear, but he said I'd be lonely and I couldn't disagree. I want to be with people. I want to be relied on by someone. I want to believe that it's okay to keep living." This single confession of Yuta is what colors his every move following, and it would even lies at the reflection of his soul, seen in his domain expansion, Authentic and Mutual Love. It's a place where techniques are stored and his allies are able to use them. By nature, it's a relationally based domain, much in the same way that his character is relationally based by design. However, this is where the conversation tends to bleed together and muddle. What the original question of living a good life or dying a good death means is filtered through the world of Jujutsu. But what's interesting to note is that the original question or idea exists outside of it. Monologues like Gojo's or Sukuna's may, for a time, be gospel within the context of what the variation of the strongest looks like, but not necessarily for what it looks like within the context of the original question itself. There's a stark difference between what makes a valuable sorcerer and what makes a person valuable. However, the story rarely distinguishes the two or does not clarify on which one it's providing commentary on. Yuta's confession of desire indicates that what makes a human life mean something is his connection and relationship with others. It's what makes it okay for him to be alive. Meanwhile, independence, isolation, and individualism is what makes a sorcerer valuable by the metric of power. These are two completely separate discussions that I believe are intentionally not explicitly divided in order for us, the reader, to blend them together. I believe JJK wants this little bit of confusion woven through the story to make its conclusion stand sharper against its themes. But in order to take a look at what I mean, we need to fold Yuji Itadori back into our analysis. Yuji is an interesting case for this discussion because he's needed to slowly but surely grapple with both these distinct ideas across the course of the series, even needing to identify where and when they overlap and diverge. The first time we see him begin to question what a good death is after he takes his first lives during the first bouts with Mahito, and once again questions and settles into a new perspective during the Shibui arc. His revelation that he and Mahito are the same is one that shatters Yuji's own personal sense of identity, because his perspective on a life well lived is contingent on a good death. The fact that he has not counted how many curses he's killed or has allowed himself to abandon the ideals he clung to so early on means that he has already failed to uphold what he believed to be correct at the beginning of the narrative. However, toward the end of the series, we get to see a newly developed Yuji Itadori now contending at the pinnacle of Jujutsu, and I think it's the entirety of chapter 265 that both once again distinguishes these two ideas, along with providing answers to the original question at the beginning of the series. First, let's take a look at the overall dynamics of the strongest framework. I think it's overall fair to say that after the reign of Sukuna, the strongest no longer exists in the way that it did. While Yuji did lay the final blow and draw the two into his domain, his victory mirrors the one that Sukuna had only a little while back, with access to support enabling his victory in the first place. To me, this suggests that JJK's fundamental views on power is shifting to the idea of the strongest being a collective instead of being a being. Yuji would not have pulled out the win without everyone that got him into that position. Ideologically, in terms of power, this reads to me like Gege pulling back on individualism, at least a bit, for a very simple reason. Let's say that the original need for power is one form to maintain and protect one's closest connections. If that power leads to the bastardization of those very connections, then the power fundamentally would fail its original objective, thus making it useless power by the metric of its own intention. The idea of the strongest is something that remains intact, but its position within the landscape shifts. This read of the ending is reinforced through both Sukuna's win over Gojo and Yuji's win over Sukuna, or really every major win in Yuji's catalog. If the value of life is not power, then power does not satiate your desire. Secondly, let's take a look at Yuji's domain and the value of human life. He takes Sukuna through his hometown, telling stories of his youth while the two engage in life's little idiosyncrasies, and after a little while, JJK drops all the veils and gives us a direct commentary on its stance for both what makes a good death and what makes a human life valuable, estranged from Jujutsu or any metric related to the others, even expounding beyond Yuta's original claim in JJK 0. Quote, "You know, up until recently, I thought I should simply live to fulfill my role as I understood it. I thought if I died like that, I could at least consider it a proper death. But now I feel that's not entirely right. Walking the dog, raising a family, any sort of role like that is just fine. Even if you don't have anything like that, as long as you can eat, crap, and sleep, even if you're stuck in bed, even if you spend your life with no connection and nothing remains of you more than the memories in one's image, it's within the tiny fragments that remain, drifting off where the value of life lies. It never had anything to do with the ways people die. I just couldn't ever forgive those who acted as if that value doesn't exist. Sukuna, I loathe you. Humans aren't tools. We aren't born with any set role. Which is to say, I don't know. I don't know whether humans are fundamentally good or evil. I could very well be doing the wrong thing here. So I thought I should at least let you see the humanity of someone other than yourself. Someone you see no value in. The value of a human life in the eyes of Yuji, and I believe JJK, is meant to be something that is cosmically inherent. It doesn't rely on power or status like the series has so muddled the ideas, or connection to counter the value of power itself. Instead, it just is. The memories made in one's image, the fact that they exist makes life valuable regardless or in spite of outside influence. It stands outside of Jujutsu, being able to be taken and applied to create the philosophies that we see in the series, but ultimately not reliant on them. This is why, though I understand the idea of Yuta being the main character, ultimately, there isn't a thematic embodiment of this central message through his character. The MC isn't some role taken up because of aura or original intention, but because of what the character means for the overall message of the series itself. Yuji Itadori is that message. He is the one who ideologically overcomes Sukuna not only by solidifying the reinvention of the strongest, by also giving that reinvention purpose by setting up to protect the value of human life. In that earlier example, when I talked about power betraying its original intention, this is what the opposite looks like. Yuji has a more fundamental philosophy beyond Jujutsu and the power that sits at the core of how he colors the world. But Sukuna has nothing at that core. He has power and power itself. Sukuna's reply to Yuji then doesn't only make narrative sense for his identity of the strongest, but also ideological sense as to what makes his life valuable. He says, quote, I don't feel a thing. I understand everything you're saying, brat, and yet no emotion stirs within me. I feel absolutely nothing. And the reason for that is because there is nothing. Sukuna values life by Jujutsu, but Yuji values Jujutsu because of life. And maybe that idea, the thought that your life matters just because it does, truly is Jujutsu Kaisen's sacred virtue. Whenever I sit down to make a video, I always put a lot of thought into what I want the video to say, whether it's the look back video or the Takopi video or the characters we see ourselves in or any single one that's been uploaded. I've always wanted it to say something, whether it just makes you think or provides you a bit of hope or you're just happy that you walked away spending your time on the video. I'm content with that. We get comments, very flattering ones, complimenting the tone of the video or the technical analysis of stuff, and I am eternally grateful for every one of those comments. If there's anything I truly want people to walk away with, it's the stuff like this. The message and the heart and the motivation of why the video is being created in the first place. If you forget or disagree with any of the technical or literary arguments I made in this video, I'm perfectly okay with that. But don't forget that last bit. Your life is valuable. Just because it is. Live a good life. And until next time, keep dreaming.